Good morning, everybody. My name's Peter Rutherford. I'm a learning designer at Italy, and I'm here to help facilitate the Teaching Innovation Showcase. We've got a collection of 5 or 6 of our prime lecturers who have come along to share some of the innovative practices they've been doing. And I think you'll find it's going to be a lovely eclectic mix. First off, I'd like to acknowledge, do the acknowledgement of country. The University of Queensland acknowledges the traditional owners in their custodianship of the lands on which we meet. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their global contributions to Australia and global society. And I'll just let you know that this session is being recorded. So, but there is an opportunity if something goes wrong, we can always have us edit things out later on. Luke is going to be assisting me. He's going to be looking in the chat as we proceed and bringing up anything to our attention if people put questions or comments in the chat. The other thing, Luke, can you just check that we're recording, please?
Yes, we're good.
Lovely. All right, we might make a start. Our first presenter is Dr. Judith Cabedi, and she's from the School of Biomedical Sciences, and she's going to be presenting on connecting individual learning experiences to real-world settings.
Thank you, Peter. All right, I don't need to do that first introduction then. So I'm from the School of Biomed, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how we tried this year to try and get students to think a little more meaningfully about the learning that they're doing in laboratory classes and how this connects to the real world. And so we know that, work integrated learning is a really big priority at UQ and across institutes as well, and that these sorts of wheel experiences are most authentic or most effective when they're authentic and proximal to where students want to go in their professional lives. And one way that we can increase task authenticity is to really make clear and explicit these connections between learning and the relevance of those experiences to the real world. And this can really increase motivation for learning, but also enhance students' development of that sense of professional identity, which is really quite important for their future success. Sorry, there's transition or animations in the slides, Peter. I didn't realize you were going to control it. So if you could click forward to one hit. Thank you. So in biomedical sciences, we're really focused on trying to enhance employability in the curriculum. And this year, for various reasons, we had to really overhaul the laboratory classes in a very large second-year subject that is core to the biomedical science program, but is also actually a prerequisite for entry to medicine at UQ. So it's taken by quite a diverse range of students from UQ. And so this created that opportunity to more overtly integrate employability, as well as address some key recommendations around employability that emerged from a recent review of the Bachelor of Biomedical Science program. So we did this through a will stretch intervention. Next slide, please, Peter. And one more, if you could click. So the students that we were doing this with are in this second year course, BIOM 2011-2013. So BIOM 2013 is just the advanced version of the course. And they're second year students. The course is a biology subject, and you can see it's very large. We have about 700 students taking it, mostly from the named degree, but also from Bachelor of Science, and about a quarter of students are actually from various allied health programs or diploma programs. Next click, please, Peter. So the laboratories involve an 8-week series, which are designed to get students introduced to the scientific process. So they engage in everything from ideation and design of their experiments to evaluation and communication of their outcomes. And so our classes and resources really focus on the conventions required in science in terms of thinking and doing and communication. And these are developed through experiences that really push students out of their comfort zones and often are novel. So they're encountering for the first time uncertainty and having to make decisions for themselves. So there's lots of mentorship as well from the large tutor team that engage in this course. And there's lots of flexibility and choice so that students can really steer these experiences towards areas that interest them within certain confines, of course. One more click, please, Peter. So the assessment involves a traditional report that contributes 20% of their course grade. Next slide, thanks. And so what we did this year was to embed a will stretch task, which involved a 500-word, what we call relevance section added into this report, and it constituted 5% of that 20%. Next click, please. So this is a sort of a summary of the instructions we gave students, but in brief, we asked them to identify a learning experience and demonstrate or describe how this connects to a topic in healthcare or research, and that this could be something that is experiential or it could be content-based. And we gave them some examples to sort of guide them in terms of what to focus on. So it could be a process that they encountered, a phenomenon that they learned about, or a technique that they used. And so here's an example of process. So troubleshooting experiments was a really big part of the series. They have to do a lot of work to troubleshoot their experiments. And so we sort of prompted them to think about, well, how does optimization of a procedure help us in terms of advancing practices in health or in research? And more importantly, when is failure really crucial for advancing our understanding? And they needed to find some examples of the topic that they're connecting to, so the particular healthcare setting that they're connecting to, but we really didn't want to be too prescriptive about where they should source these examples, other than to use their critical judgment to determine whether the sources are valid. One more click, please, Peter. And then we designed, of course, a rubric to evaluate students' responses. Next click, please. So in this slide and the next one, I'll show you some graphs, and this is a subset of the students' responses. So 56 students, and just note that what we're showing here are the number of responses, and that students could cite multiple themes of responses. So most students described learning that related to developing their knowledge around particular concepts. So the experiments were the central sort of theme was around cardiovascular function. So a lot of students talked about developing or broadening their understanding around cardiovascular physiology and pharmacology. Some students talked about developing their skills. So for example, starting to really appreciate variable factors of experimental design for rigor, or conventions in writing, in scientific writing. Students also talked about troubleshooting and optimization, and how those experiences really got them to engage in practicing problem solving and critical thinking, which was really, really great to see. And a subset of students also talked about the use of animals in science, whether that be in research or even the ethics of using animals, or in education, and where there are available options for alternatives to animal use. Next click, please, Peter. So when we looked at also what context students connected their learning to, so the topic, whether that be in the healthcare or research, these are the major themes that emerged. So most of the students connected it to a clinical setting, which wasn't surprising given many of our students are intent on pursuing medicine. So they talked about how their learning related to topics in diagnosing or treating diseases, or surgical skills, such as the precision required from the dissections that they carried out. Of course, research, so advancing knowledge, but also the rigors that are required in conducting science effectively. And then also professional practice was another major theme that emerged. So particularly around students thinking about their responsibility as communicators of science in society and the ethical and proper conduct of science. Next slide, please, Peter. And we also looked at what sort of sources students used to support this relevant section and their discussions. So we looked at the number of sources, with most students talking about 2 to 3 references to support their discussions, but some, or one student anyway, cited up to 7 different types of sources, which was amazing. In terms of types, most of the students use journal articles, some textbooks, some websites, particularly disease organisations or the World Health Organization. And one student even cited the University of WA's ethics page, which was really interesting. So they read really quite wide. And the sorts of disciplines that they drew on mostly were science or clinical studies, but some students drew from wider perspectives such as psychology, law, and education to support their ideas. Next slide, please, Peter. Okay, so this is where I share. Thank you. Right. So I've just got 2 examples of students' responses here. So these are parts of the whole relevant section that they presented. Can you all see that okay, Peter? Is that coming through? Yeah. So on the left, you've got a student who talked about the rigors in science and conducting sort of reproducibility, particularly, and the role of that in society. And then on the right, a student who talks about their thinking around the ethics of using animals in science. So I've got a few minutes. So I'm just going to give everyone about 30 seconds or so just to scan one or both of these so that you can have a read through and see what students were talking about.
And Judith, I'll just point out you have 3 minutes.
Yep. I've only got 1 more slide, so good. Okay, so I'll keep going, but I'm happy to share with anyone the sorts of things that students were writing about if they're interested in seeing more of these. But I think these are really wonderful examples of the depth of and introspective thinking that some students engaged in terms of how the learning experiences they encountered, how they're relevant to them and the professional world. Next slide, please, Peter. Oh, sorry. I should stop sharing, shouldn't I? There we go. Back to you. Thank you. And then over to the next slide. So just some reflections about how our intervention went. So I think this was a pretty simple stretch on existing assessment, which is really easy to implement. And certainly in many students' cases, it seemed to be really of value. They talked quite reflectively about their learning experience and its connection to things beyond the classroom. Really the task description was tricky to write, but relatively little prompting required, and it triggered quite diverse and deep thinking within some students anyways about the learning that they gained. And some students also showed surprisingly large effort in researching the topic that they were connecting it to, despite very little prompting about how many references and what types of references they should draw on. There is some care needed in developing the rubric. As we know, for particularly these sorts of reflective tasks, it can be quite tricky, and especially in the moderation of how tutors were applying that rubric, that was also quite tricky. And lastly, it seemed that some students seemed to misunderstand the task. So instead of talking about the relevance of their learning, they were talking about the implications of their experimental outcomes in the broader research and health setting. And that meant that there was often an absence of that personal reflection. So in terms of getting students to connect with their learning in those cases, it didn't seem to work. Next slide, please, Peter.
And we'll have to finish up in a moment.
And just want to say thank you to the students, our but still wonderful learning designers, Charlotte and Corinne, my colleague Dan, and to the tutor team as well.
Thank you, Judith. That was really interesting. If you have any questions, because of our time pressures, I'll encourage you to put them in the chat, and Judith will keep an eye on that and be able to respond. So questions or comments in the chat, please. What I'd like to do now is to introduce Tim Puckering from the School of the Environment. He's got his own little presentation that he's going to do from his desktop. So, Tim, you're ready to go as soon as I stop sharing here.
Thank you very much. Let me go ahead and... How's that? Is that working?
Yes, we can see a slide.
Wonderful. I'll get started straight away then, yes?
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll give you a 3-minute notice when it's time to come to.
Thank you very much. All right. So, hi, everyone. I am Tim Puckering from the School of Environment. I have been a tutor in UQ Science Practicals for considerably more than a decade at this point. In the last year and a half, I've been employed by several UQ academics, James Fraser, Liz Gillam, and Paul Ebert, on the basis of a teaching and learning grant to produce this thing that we're calling the customizable practical module library. So it was envisioned as a large library of modular resources that could be employed to basically to modernize and improve the practical experience at UQ. So at UQ, we judge that the science practicals that we offer is one of the main benefits for our student cohorts in particular. So the idea was to produce a bunch of images, animations, and various resources that didn't elsewhere exist, so that academics in charge of courses can take them as modules based on individual techniques and piece together very easily new, innovative, practical experiences. In the course of doing this over this year, I was also employed to implement them into Biol 2202, which is one of our main genetics courses, our main second-year genetics course at UQ, a very large cohort. And in the course of doing that, we kind of came up with a new model and a new philosophy of running practicals that we feel might be very sort of useful for us in the future as well. So in terms of what the modules look like, the library contains a bunch of different things, actually. So it's a large library of bespoke imagery to begin with. So the bunch of new little individual component images that can be picked up and used if necessary. But these have also been already pre-combined into easily deployed, pre-made, multi-purpose information pages. So these can be lab book pages. So lab manuals can be revolutionized and innovated in by just dumping these pre-made information pages in. And we've also got a whole bunch of theory pages that can be used as pre-labs and exercises and things like this. As you can see, there's quite a lot of them there. So in addition to that, a huge focus of ours has been making new animations. So in molecular biology, especially to our students, a lot of the experiments that we have them do have this sort of mysterious nature. They are done either in a big mysterious white machine where they put some things into the machine and they wait for a while and then the results come out, or in a tiny tube of clear liquid. They combine a bunch of clear liquids, something mysterious happens. We tell them what's happening, of course, but to them, they've put some clear liquids into a tube and something has happened, and they report to us as they leave laboratories that they know they did something, but they don't necessarily know exactly what, even if they did the experiment successfully. So we wanted to make a lot of highly visual, highly animated, theoretical explanations specifically for what happens in molecular biology and genetics experiments, because these things don't exist widely. You might have the impression that there's a lot of high quality science videos and animations out there on YouTube and so forth. But a big part of my job has been to look for any good animations that already exist about these techniques, the theoretical underpinnings of something like PCR or gel electrophoresis or something. And we discovered there really aren't any. Well, with like extensive searching has not shown up any good ones. Like there's a lot of videos about people performing the experiments, but almost nothing that actually shows anybody what's actually happening on a molecular level, the important theory that's happening while these experiments are going on. So, I mean, PCR is probably the most important and commonly taught technique, but none of the top-rated YouTube videos, none of the YouTube videos that I could find at all, explain that technique accurately enough to ensure a passing grade in our first-year courses. Several of them, including the top-rated video, have actual glaring scientific errors. So we really wanted to double down and make sure that when the students are doing these experiments, they have some animations that actually show them what's going on. So I just want to run through some of the animations that we've made so far with the help of Italy's animation team that target these sort of mysterious tubes and machines and show what's actually going on. So an example is restriction enzymes. When students want to digest DNA, what they're actually doing in the experiment is placing some clear liquids in a tube and waiting for an hour. Then they can see their results afterwards. What's actually happening in that tube is a bunch of cool stuff. The enzyme is running along the strands of DNA, doing this linear search. It works as a dimer so that it can show they can hit both strands at the same time. More animations here shows, like, this is a slightly more idealized version that shows the active site and how the active site actually links to sticky end formation. All of these things are things, all of these aspects I'm pointing out are things that we've never found any good explanation visually for before, by the way. This is another example showing how a different enzyme can make a different cut site. Things we can tell them, but it helps so much to be able to show them. Some of the experiments they do involve using these enzymes, like here, to cut out a compatible sticky end DNA fragment so that it can be pasted somewhere else. This is something that really helps them to be able to see. Moving on to more explanations, gel electrophoresis is another mysterious experiment. This is the machine, what it looks like. To do this experiment, they're just going to take a blue liquid, squirt it into this machine, and turn it on for 30 minutes. What's actually happening is quite mysterious to them. I know it's mysterious to them because they're often asking me questions. Exactly how does electricity work? You turn it's plugged into a power socket. What's electricity got to do with the whole experiment? They kind of get how DNA can be made to move through the gel, but they won't understand, in my experience, things like why the electricity actually is involved, why the charge gradient actually causes the movement. This little animation shows how actual separation is achieved. Based on, like, all of this is based on current literature too. So sometimes very current literature. This is an example where only in the last 5 years do people actually truly get to the biophysics of why DNA fragments move differentially based in this gel. It's because of this, they call it reptation, which just means snake-like. It's snake-like movement is what's actually causing it. It really helps students to be able to see something like this. Meanwhile, at the electrodes, where actual electricity is happening, where the actual electricity is entering and leaving the system, the explanations they usually get are sort of very abstract, whereas what we wanted to do was make visual explanations that clearly show what's going on. Now, I'm going to run out of time. Sorry, I'm going to have to skip over some more of the explanation, these animations. Suffice to say that there's a fair few of them, and they target the things that I know that we have learned from experience, students don't generally understand, and that a visual explanation is lacking for. Now, another thing I want to show you, I'm going to move away from PowerPoint briefly and onto the internet, where a really big highlight of the collection of resources that we've been making is this actual simulator. So this is a simulator that we have created with the help of Italy programming that actually simulates the actions inside PCR. A PCR machine is one of those big mysterious white boxes I'm talking about. It cycles temperature, but what's happening is on a DNA level. So with this simulator, we can show students the actual molecules and have them manipulate them into place, moving them around, flipping them upside down so that they can understand their physical interactions. And every aspect of how PCR works is simulated, including how polymerase can grow these strands. I would spend a long time happily showing you this simulator and how powerful it actually is to put something like this in the hands of students. But I am way shorter for time than I thought I would be. Suffice it to say that on this website, this is a program, but it's a platform agnostic program. So it works on the internet. You can embed it into any website. You can send it to somebody in an email. It works with a single central version that just works through embedding. So there's an innovation we made that allows you to just add some things just to the HTML embed code that makes the program start with whatever conditions you want. So you can program in this case, I programmed in a series of mastery questions that allows students, I deployed this in first year students in a first year course with over 1,000 students, and a cohort that normally fails their PCR questions and final exams was able to get to answering questions like this, which are really third year level questions, within 30 minutes of working with this program. I'm extremely excited about it. I would love to chat more with anybody who wants to talk about that. We intend to make more. What was that?
2 minutes to go.
2 minutes to go. Okay, I'm really going to have to speed up. So the main thing the other main thing that I really wanted to talk about is how we deployed these assets in a practical. So we have a sort of a new philosophy of how we can run a practical with these that involves having, for the purposes of student equity, we organized it so that a single head tutor, me in this case, this is how we deployed it in Bio 2202, one of our, the course I was talking about before, the big one, big genetics course. We had, using the CPML assets specifically, we are able to make it so that a single head tutor in charge of these assets can deliver the theory in the form of small presentations, short presentations, and we can have the animations and slides running in the background while the experiments proceed, slightly changing the role of our UQ demonstrators away from having to do theoretical explanations for each individual group, which was causing problems with student equity. No one was happy, none of the students were happy when somebody next to them was getting more explanation, or if they were in the more explanation group, they did not like the fact that they were having to spend more time. So no student was particularly happy. This makes things much more equitable. The demonstrators are able to focus on what they're great at, which is their technical expertise and practical advice. Meanwhile, because we were able to do this, the scalability of the experience was drastically increased. We saved labor costs by 33%, and the practical manual could be completely redesigned based on the assets, reducing printing costs by over 80%. We changed it from a big, thick 70-page manual to a slim 8 pages that used the CPML assets to do this 2-page per technique tight molecular kit style protocol combined with a clear flowchart style explanation page. So real quick now, we ran this model very successfully. The location has a capacity for really upping the amount of students, so it's scalable without loss of quality. It ran better, and the reception, I have to report, it was overwhelmingly positive for everybody that we talked to. The tech staff appreciated it, the academics love it, and anyone I've talked to has tried to start putting CPML assets in their lectures and stuff so far. Demonstrators appreciate the change in focus, and the students are particularly happy. We had just real briefly, we had a cohort of international students from the Sichuan Agricultural University this semester. Whose English was necessarily just enough, and they said that the lectures were quite difficult and the various contents were difficult, but that the practicals in particular, because of all this visualization, were clear and easy to understand. So that cohort is going to go from 20 to 150 next year. So we're really hoping that this kind of thing can be a real help for students like that. The feedback we're getting is fantastic.
That's wonderful, Tim.
You're going to have to stop me.
I encourage you to have a look at the chat when you finish up, because I'm not sure if there's any questions, but there's certainly a lot of positive comments in there that you can take.
Yeah. I apologize. I got through most of it anyway, but we're really hoping that that's going to be able to be developed even further in the future.
Lovely.
And I wanted to thank Elizabeth Gillam, James Fraser, and Paul Ebert for employing me, and everyone in Italy for helping me get it done.
Excellent. And I'm sure your students appreciate the efforts that you've gone to as well. I'm just going to, if you could just stop sharing now, please, Timothy.
There you go.
And we appreciate your efforts there. And I'm going to be I've just lost my screen. Right. So I'd now like to introduce Frederic Ricard, John Reity, and Franciola Spinelli from the School of Economics, and they're going to be sharing with us something that they've been doing to get more effective work from their students in small group work, in tutorials, sorry. Thank you, Franciola. Frederic.
Would it be possible to have on slideshow where we see only the slide, not the...
You can't see the slides at the moment?
Yeah, but it's not on slideshow. We see the left.
Sorry, I'm sharing it on the screen then. How's that?
Ah, perfect. Thank you so much. So, the previous presentation was amazing. I'm sure there will be more chat when I'm speaking. So, hi everyone, and Fran, John, and I are very happy to be with you today to share with you our experience of a very different type of tutorial that we call very originally the 3-color tutorial that has been designed to facilitate small group activity during the tutorial. So this is an innovation that we have that has been implemented since 2015 in a very large, advanced third-year economics course called Financial Market and Institution. So in order to reap the benefit of peer interaction during tutorial, we run for this course a 2-hour long tutorial to provide enough time to run 3 or 4 group activity per tutorial. So as you certainly have experienced yourself in your own class, interaction in a group are intricate because students are inevitably at different stages of their learning journey. So the well-prepared students can feel quite frustrated by the lack of active collaborator, when those less prepared could feel inadequate for not contributing to the discussion. In my course, it was very clear that the heterogeneity in students' level of preparation and preparedness was really detrimental to group interaction. Next, please, Peter. So the three-color scheme was my way to address that specific issue of lack of homogeneity. So how does it work? So when students arrive in the classroom, they choose a color out of three that reflect their level of exposure and confidence for the topic that is covered during that week in tutorial. So green means I feel I'm prepared. Blue, I prepared, but I do not feel confident. And yellow is I haven't had much exposure to the topic yet. So with tables of 4 or to 6 students with the same colors, we have now some bubbles of that are more homogeneous. But the scheme goes well beyond simply those homogeneous bubbles. Next, please, Peter. Thank you. So the students are offered differentiated activity around the tutorial question, tailored to be both feasible and stimulating at the same time for students at a particular stage of their learning journey for that topic. So typically, the green group would compare their answers, they would discuss, resolve discrepancy, and rapidly tackle a more challenging task around the question. The yellow group, on the other hand, they will receive some course material relevant to the particular question of the tutorial, and they will solve together a simplified version of the tutorial question, a simplified version that is within their reach. The blue usually stick to the original tutorial problem. So the differentiation allows all learners to progress, to engage, and to progress regardless of their level of preparedness. So it's a very inclusive scheme with no students held up or no students left behind. Next, please. So the role of the tutor is special in this setting. During group activity, tutors wander around the table, staying on standby, ready to jump in if needed. So the beauty of it is that the color labeling of tables allows them to customize their support. Next, please. Thank you. The originality of this three-color approach and its associated learning benefits have been acknowledged by some two teaching awards at the school level and the faculty level. But more importantly, we know that students have understood the intent of the three-color and they are willing to differentiate, with roughly a fifth of the cohort choosing green, a third of the cohort choosing yellow. So they reportedly feel safe working in the three-color environment with no stigma associated to choosing yellow. So we had a teaching innovation grant to explore the adaptation of the three-color tutorial to an online environment. I now let John explain the weaknesses we have identified during the classroom observation that have been conducted during this project and how we have addressed them.
All right, thank you, Frederic, and good morning, everyone. Peter, could I have the next slide, please? So we found a second challenge, and when we were observing the tutorials in semester 2 last year and during the summer, we found there was a lack of collaboration and interaction between the students. So we sat down and we had a look at the pedagogy. Even though the students were in their colored groups, what could we do to enable that collaboration and interaction? And essentially what we did was we built in activities, particularly at the beginning of each tutorial, and these were icebreakers. and they help to build that relationship with the between the students and the tutor, and the students and the students in the group, and it also created that overall sense of belonging. So I'll show you an example of an icebreaker in a moment, but once we looked at the pedagogy, we then thought, okay, well, what technology do we need to enable that collaboration to really happen? And traditionally, we were just using the whiteboard on Zoom. It has its limitations. Even in the room, the students had a physical whiteboard. For those in the face-to-face tutorial, they weren't using that. We thought of other technology options like Jamboard. We'd had some strengths and weaknesses, but then we eventually settled on Miro, which Fran will talk about in a moment. So could I have the next slide, Peter? Thank you. And so this is an example of one of the icebreakers we created using the chase, which is in H5P. So at the beginning of a tutorial, a few revision questions from the previous week would be shown. Students would go through that. Next slide, Peter. Thank you. And they could create their own avatar and put their name in, or if they wanted to use a different name, that's fine. And it was a little bit of fun for the first few minutes of a tutorial, and there's this live leaderboard which appears, and that really got the students engaged and starting to talk to each other, and a really good connection with the tutor as well. And if you want to play the game, I can give the URL at the end if you are keen to have a go. Next slide, please, Peter. And so we observed with the icebreakers that the students were very engaged. The collaborative environment that we're really seeking was there. The icebreaker really set the scene for that. And yeah, generally the second comment there, the face-to-face tutorials, it also worked in the face-to-face tutorials as well. So next slide, please, Peter.
And I'll just let you know, John, that we're down to 3 minutes.
Sure, and I'll pass over to Fran now, who speak about Miro.
All right, so thank you, John. So I don't have much time, but I'll try my best. So as John mentioned, we decided to look for some collaborative tools to help students collaborate while they were working on the tutorial problems. And then we decided to use Miro. So I don't know if you are familiar with Miro, but Miro is a collaborative whiteboard, and I'm just pasting a link in the chat. If you want to have a look at one of the examples from this course, you can also scan the QR code. And what is good about Miro is that it offers the ability for multiple users to work simultaneously on the same board, which was very important for such a large class, as Frederick mentioned. And although Miro has a free plan, it also has an education plan that Frederick applied for. And when you have that license, that plan, students don't need to log into Miro. So they get the link and they can jump in straight away and start collaborating on the board. So next slide, please. So this is just a screenshot from the Miro board that I shared with you. And as you can see, we developed different frames with different colors. So students knew which group and which frame they had to use to collaborate with the group. Next slide. And then this is an example from a green group. So as you can see, what they did is, because they had already prepared their answers before coming to the tutorial, they just uploaded their answers, compared with one another, and annotated on things that needed maybe to be improved or fixed. And they also worked on the extension of the problems. Next slide. Then for the blue group, as you can see, they used Miro functions a little bit more. So they explored some lines, some drawing functions to work on the problem and to draw the balancing sheets. And then next slide. For the yellow group, so what happened was that the teaching team uploaded some slides with key information from the UQ Extend material. And then this information helped scaffolded the yellow group to understand the problem and to understand key concepts before they tried a few pieces of the problem. And next slide. So some of our preliminary findings show that, as you can see in the first graph, that many students have enjoyed the experience of using Miro. And also on the second graph, what we can see is that many students within the groups are connecting and using Miro, But unfortunately, as you can also see in the second graph, not all the students within a group are using Miro necessarily. And next slide, please.
Thank you, Fran. I'll have to ask you to finish up in a moment.
Yes, so this is just some other feedback that student partners have helped us to collect about the efficiency of Miro. And then next slide. So just in terms of our next steps, so we plan to have another round of SSP to focus on icebreakers for more mature students. And then we would also like to improve the current training that has been provided to tutors, given their very particular and special role for the efficiency of the three colors. And also with all the data that we've collected from the class observations to develop an index of engagement to see the impacts and to understand how the three color impacts on student engagement. So I think that's all from us. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, happy to answer through the chat. Thank you.
Thank you to the economics team. Yeah, we are running to a really tight schedule today. So any comments or questions into the chat, please. We appreciate your efforts. And we're going to jump over now to the School of Agriculture and Food Sustainability. And Dr. Edward Narayan is going to give us a presentation on engaging first years, which is something of a challenge for many people, I'm sure. Thanks, Edward.
Thanks, Peter, and thank you, colleagues. So I will give you some examples of what we have been doing with our first year anatomy course, just to give you a bit of a background context. So this particular course is a core course in our agriculture program and also the veterinary technology and wildlife science program. So we cater for a good range of students across various programs, and it has both an internal and external mode. Next slide, Peter, please. Over the last 4 years, so I have been coordinating the course for it's our 5th run this year. And we've noticed that we need to look at the student evaluation data to understand what improvements we are making. So I'm just presenting to you here a snapshot of the past 4 years of bar graphs showing the student ratings for questions 1 to 8, and 8 is on your right in the table, the overall score. So what we have seen here is that, in 2019 and then during COVID, there were significant challenges, but we've always tried to get the numbers above the 4 line. Next slide, Peter. And the same goes for the course evaluation as well. So in the next few slides, I will talk to you about certain things that we have been doing, which shows how we've been able to uplift the student evaluation satisfaction rates. Next slide, Peter, please. There you go. So these are pretty much 18, 19-year-old kids who are really ambitious and passionate about science and animal science. And they have aim to become a veterinarian or a wildlife biologist or an agribusiness consultant. And anatomy is pretty much hands-on. And I would lead off with a quote from Benjamin Franklin, who says that tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. And I think that's the motto that I have tried to build with our team for the last 4 years. So one of the first things that we've actually done is we've set some really standard goals and lessons to actually help students to understand what the purpose of the course is. And on your right, you can see that that's the front page of the Blackboard site. And we've worked very, beautifully with the technology available at UQ through Italy. And we can see we've worked with the learning pathway. So every week, students get to see this interface through the learning pathway, and there's a checklist which basically gives you a bit of a preempt as to what would be happening in the week, as you can see on the bottom right over there. And it just gives a bit of opportunity for students to prepare themselves for the week, the rolling week, which basically can be with a very intensive, combination of lectures and practicals, or it can be an off-break week. So this has been quite useful by presenting some goals clearly to the students to give them a good starting point. Next slide, Peter, please. One thing that I have come to notice during our practicals is, in particular, students are lost when they don't have a clear learning plan. So one of the things also with our teaching team, and I'll talk a bit about, we have a good group of tutors, around 7 or so tutors, a mix up of some of, my own PhD students and some really passionate UQ graduates who are, the UQ emblem is something they hold very close to their heart, and they want to give something back. So, they get rewarded by being in the academia while looking for a job. And what we see is that, we in the beginning had practicals being rolled every week, and it was a bit of a pressure point for our technicians and the course itself. And we've tried to scaffold, as you can see on the table on your right, integrative system. So when you talk about anatomy, the heart talks to the lungs, the lungs talks to the gut, and the brain and the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, they all talk to each other. And so we've actually given some basic, skill set and to prepare them with their toolbox, which then they can build upon and then go into advanced years. So one of the things, as you can notice, is looking at the blood, cells under a microscope. So, for our first year students, it's an opportunity for them to see in real time, how you make a blood smear, or what are the technical challenges that can, things that can go wrong in a practical setting. So, you go from 1 to 5 in the table, and you prepare a blood smear. It's pretty boring and dull, and then once you throw in some colors, you get to color the DNA and the cytoplasm in specific manner according to the specificity of the dye and the cell itself. And then you actually get to learn how to prepare a hematocrit, which actually will be quite useful if you were to assess things like animals which are anemic or something like that. So it's pretty much we've noticed, and I think I should thank where I picked this idea was actually from. Some people might laugh, but it's actually from the prep class of my daughter, whom I drop every morning to school. And I noticed that they actually have a lesson plan. So I quickly picked up a lesson plan, and the tutors loved it. And and we actually maximize the use of the space in the practicals, in the lab itself. And on the left and the right of the room, you'll have these boards which are made of glass. And we want the students to pick up the the marker and go and draw the heart as it looks like on the animal, not to just copy from the textbook. And we've seen it significantly increase the engagement. We have peer-to-peer learning, students working in groups, and it actually has definitely seen an improvement. Next slide, Peter, please. And so, strategy 3 is basically explicit learning. And the elephant in the room here, some of you may have heard about it, it's the woolly mammoth. So this is the mammoth, this is the significant assessment, I would say, and anyone can compete with me on this. It's a significant portfolio that first year students actually get to write. I would love to learn from other colleagues, but the woolly mammoth basically means that we've given a fun take to learning anatomy. And it's not just a boring, tell me what, how does a bird fly, or how does a buffalo, migrate, or, how does a whale, migrate very, long distances. And so we give a quiz in week 1 to students where they actually pick up variables, which is made up of the animal's characteristics and the environment. So it could be a herbivore, it could be a carnivore, it could be a tree-dwelling animal. We give them what the weight of the animal is, whether it lives in snow or it lives in an arid landscape here in Australia. And so we actually then get them the free rein to actually go and do the hunting and gathering over the 13 weeks. And as you can see, from 1 to 5. So it's not just shutting the doors and let them do whatever they like. We have a very strong connection, as you can see in the second number 2, with the library. So the librarians at the Gatton campus have put in significant effort to build a woolly mammoth database. And that's played a significant part in actually helping students to, with their research. And in week 3, we actually bring the academic consultants who actually help out with the academic writing. And so, for example, Turnitin is used to submit the assignment. So we are very strong on looking at the similarity scores, and so how students actually are able to interpret a piece of scientific work or a previously presented work in their own understanding and in a manner that actually avoids the risk of plagiarism. And then what happens is we actually have tutorials. So I discovered that, as I heard from other colleagues as well, the tutorials can get really dull and boring, and we won't have bumps on seats if we just go in there. And there needs to be a very one-on-one guidance from myself to the tutors to actually set up a plan of attack to what the tutorial will actually look like. And so what we did here was that we got the tutors to actually open up the discussion. So I had two tutors actually in the tutorials, and we have the tutorial template. And then if I can just show a slide of my own, Peter, if that's okay, very quickly. Sorry, I did not ask this before in the revisions. Yep. So just very quickly, if that's okay with colleagues, what we've done is we've actually got students to walk through this technology called the Padlet. And can you see this, Peter?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, mate. And so we can see over here, it really gives the space to students to engage and interact with us during the tutorials, and you get to ask questions. And this sets up a repository of knowledge, and it's accessible to any student, and they can actually post things anonymously, or and it doesn't matter. We all encourage peer-to-peer learning, and we take this all the way through the end, towards the end of the the weekly tutorials. So that's been quite good. Can I go back to the slides, Peter? Sorry.
Yes, we can. You're down to 3 minutes, Edward.
Yep, I'll wrap it up very soon. So I'll need to access the slides again. Thanks.
Okay.
Can I go to the next slide, please?
We'll do that.
Lovely, thanks, Peter. So this is the discussion board, and as we know at UQ, we've actually moved to add discussion board. No resemblance to my name, but it's been a valuable resource. You can see we've had 303 participation, 206 threads, 187 answers. We get students to put the heart. We are all humans, so we want to actually have love in there, and as we teach, and so it's been quite exciting. Especially the questions have been around woolly mammoth, and I've discovered that it's not a tedious task for the academics, because the students are helping each other. Next slide, Peter, please. This is something else that we have done is, but I'd love to learn with the Chase HP5 that could be used as well. We've done formative assessments using Kahoot, and it engages students. For example, here you can see 101 answers were given right in the room. So we had students 101 students in the lecture itself, and so that was really amazing. And you get to acknowledge and upload students who do really well, and it's a fun take to learning anatomy. Next slide, please, Peter. And yeah, so we sort of get them to break down complexity by looking at things, whether it works or does not work. Like if animals are flying, do we put in feathers? Do we put in fins? And so looking at the decision tree, and I think that's been quite helpful as well. We might know about this already. Next slide, Peter. I think that's my last slide. And so I think the last thing that I would say here is to give the opportunity for students to practice continual learning. And so what we have done is we've grouped students, so they would come in and like, Peter and I might be mates and we actually sit together, but then we join with other students, and throughout the semester, we get to learn how to work with another person and build a positive professional working relationship. And we use tutors as active educators. So me as the they see an academic, I don't know, the positive energy might not be there. It's a bit hard. So I try to go back and get my tutors to actually be the leaders and the champions, and they actively participate in the small group activity. And we get to dissect things and get to encourage students to actually share the task. So if you are cutting, making a dissection, it's not just one person and the others are watching. We get to stop, take a breather, and then give the chance to the other person. So, we respect everyone's space. And so we also promote hands-on learning. So use the hand, hold the pen with your hand, and then you draw things. And so that encourages cognitive learning. So just finally, Peter, if I can quickly share one slide, if that would be okay, if you let me do that. I'll just share my screen very quickly.
Okay, we'll have to be quick on this one, Edward.
Yeah,
So
I think I need to do that. Yep. So very quickly. And I would like to acknowledge the tutor team. And this is pretty much the team that we rely heavily on, and acknowledging the ACFES technicians and the tutors who have played a significant part with me and Mr. Suresh Krishnasamy as well, to actually build anatomy to where it is, and we are quite positive about the future. So thank you very much, and I look forward to engaging with colleagues.
Great, thank you, Edward. That was really interesting, learning some of those new strategies for engaging those first years. We're going to move now to the School of Languages and Cultures, and Noriko is going to share what she's been doing with her team. So I'm just bringing up the screen for us. Over to you, Noriko.
Yes, I am. I'm just trying to. Anyway, thank you so much. And this will be a group presentation. So I'm going to start very briefly about the background of this. Is this the animation is happening here, or yes? If you could just, yes, I'm going to talk about the background, and then as Anita will take over, and the context and also method, and how it's going to talk about the discussion. This is all about the next slide, please. Could I? Yes, thank you. So we are going to talk about the students' reflections on the course where you could extend that to Learn X is implemented to 2 courses in the Master of Applied Linguistics program. So these 2 courses are offered in flipped mode since 2018 or 19, but these courses have been really well received and being very popular. And yes, so we do offer as in other courses, learning management systems such as like Blackboard have really sort of remained as really popular. However, we thought was strategies for implementing inclusive teaching and the classroom management practice really have changed, especially when we had a global pandemic. And also we had a really great opportunity to work with ITALI staff and also students partners. So we decided to implement all all materials that will deliver through Learn X. So then it is, so in doing this, we thought about some various issues in terms of the framework, the importance of inclusive practice, how we can implement. It's been mentioned at HEA revised the professional standards standard framework for teaching and supporting. So, and the extent the course redevelopment for inclusive practices actually was really varied vastly from adding just a simple online presence to incorporating various ongoing digital technology adaptations. So it is really, and many students, it's also many studies stress that it's a really flexible and online pedagogical process to provide all students with equitable learning experience. That's we thought, because especially when we are offering these courses in dual mode, it is really how we can make it is a equitable learning experience. Now we are all as these courses are offered only in person. However, still it is a manipulation of technology and various things. We just wanted to make it how we can make it easier for all students, and also we really and also that enhanced learning. So we did also consider about social cultural theory perspective. That is really mediation that include both internal conceptual knowledge and external, that is technology and learning material tools play a really significant role in development of higher mental functions. So then also this process is digitally revitalizing course materials provide further opportunity for students to socially interact in different ways. So it is, and then also another things we did consider is about the technology adaptation model. It really has emerged as a valuable framework for understanding, explaining, and predicting an individual readiness and to embrace technology. So because we've been done this flip mode, it's been offered, as I said, it's quite for a while now. So we really wanted to make it sure and it's equitable and also accessible framework and also to opportunity to enhance students' learning and also engagement. So then it's to our first step is really we decided to collect students' reflections. So I'm going to hand over to Anita and she will talk about more about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nariko. Sorry, Peter, we've got a lot of clicks in our slides. So part of the digital uplift program, we were taught to just, add the extra clicks for further engagement. So I think for the next few slides, you can just click through while we're talking.
Sure, I didn't realize they were in there for that one.
Sorry, I added quite a lot. So for the next slides, so first I'd like to show, we're just going to be showcasing 2 of our courses where we've been using flipped learning. So with the first course, 7001, this is an introductory course. And apart from learning the content, we also wanted to get students familiar with using the different applications. So being familiar with Blackboard would be the first part. So I think we'll just click through, Peter. Thank you. So the first part was the Blackboard site. So with the Blackboard, similar to other courses that we saw in today's presentations, we also did a checklist type of thing where we're trying to encourage students to just kind of go through. So we've organized it based off pre-class, post-class, and pre-class, in-class, and post-class activities. And here you can see that you can just kind of see the checklist each time. And this is an example of our embedded online module. So we're using UQ Extend. As we know, with a lot of the courses, we're trying to incorporate YouTube clips and different sort of resources. So what we wanted to do was just to reduce a lot of the clicks that students have to focus on and really get them to focus or engage more socially, right, with their peers in the group work instead of having to spend a lot of time just looking for the resources on Blackboard. So within our classes in the in-class, where we want the students to apply the content that they've learned during the pre-task assessment pieces, We just want them to stay on UQ Extend for those processes. So another one, thanks, Peter, would be our online exhibition platform. So this is the Serious platform where we're getting the students to create a group website. So they really have to apply all of the theories and the key concepts that they've learnt during the pre-class and in-class activities. And we're trying to get them to create a website for just a general audience. And they really have to think about how they would explain the theories using lay language and their own personal experiences to a non-SLA audience. And of course, finally, with the next click, we have the online assessment tool Inspira. So we've been using Inspira, I would say, for a year, since last year. And we've been using it for the pre-class and the post-class assessment tasks, where we're getting the students to either complete the quizzes first, just to see how much they remember from the course readings and the videos, but also the reflection to kind of get them to reflect and also prepare them for the final assessment task, which is a reflective essay where they have to apply what they've learned. So in the next course, the SLAT 7826, in this course, we use a similar platform, but the main difference in this course is we're really trying to get students to reflect and also collaborate. So within the UQ Ed Extend, we've tried to incorporate different activities to kind of enhance their levels of participation. So here we've got an example. If we just click through, we've got the YouTube clips, and then we've also got the group activity sheets, getting them to use Google Docs. And also we have a class game where we're trying to get students to respond to questions in real time as well. So, and another activity that we wanted to incorporate, which is different from the first course, was a post-class reflective activity through using discussion boards. So this was where the students really just, they were given a set allocated reading, which they had to complete first, and then answer or respond to certain questions through discussion posts with their groups. And this was to get them to also extend on their ideas and reflect on their own teaching practices and so on. So looking at these different courses, we'll just click to the next two slides. Thank you. During this process, so this was during our pilot study, and what we're interested in seeing was how the different cohorts would actually respond to the activities that we create. So we understand that there are a lot of different tools being used within the course, and we wanted to see how the different tools would actually increase different levels or different dimensions of engagement. So now I'll move on to Hal, who's going to be talking a bit more about the data collection that we were doing or is currently still doing. Thanks, Hal.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita. And we've got 3 minutes left for this session.
Thanks, Anita. Thanks, Peter. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you can see that we have used a lot of Digit2 in our two courses, SLAT 7001 and SLAT 7826, as Anita presented. So we are using the RD module of instructional design, in which stands for analyze, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. So these 5 key steps here, so far we have implemented the 4 steps already, from analyzing, design, development, and implementation in those 2 courses. And we are in the last stage here of evaluation. Next click, please. Sorry, we do have a lot of clicks. And next clicks as well, thanks. So to help to evaluate students' perception of the digital tool that we use to see if they help them to enhance their the engagement, we try to collect the evaluation from the midterm survey and also end of semester evaluation. So the end of semester evaluation here actually is the CCAT one. So it's a pre-design, of course, from our university already. However, for the midterm or mid-semester evaluation here, we particularly design and some questions to explore whether students feel engaged or whether they perceive like a positively perceived with the digital tool that we use in the 2 courses. So for the 2022 and 2023, we have used 2 semesters for the first course, SLAT 7001, And we have used one semester for slot 7826. And for those from 2002 to 2023, we have collected 138 responses from students. So basically that's quite a good number, considering the quite small scale of classes that we have in our program. So through those 138 responses, we try to analyze whether students have very good perception with the use of these digital tools or not. Next click, please, Peter.
Thank you, Hal, and I'll have to ask you to finish up very quickly.
Yep. So as you can see right here, sorry. So as you can see here, that we only showed 2 examples of the 2 questions we designed on the midterm survey. So you can see the first one, the question whether the students think the flipped classroom has improved their learning strategy or not. And then the second one, we particularly look at whether they feel like the other digital tool that embedded in the UQ Extend, etc., whether they feel it is also helpful because all the information, all the embedded tools and platform are all together in one space. So as you can see here, from these 2 examples, we can see that the students think the digital tools are positive, and it helps to maintain the course quality and satisfaction despite all the challenges we have so far. So as you can see, consider back to other presenter, for example, from Frederick and other and her team in using of Miro, we can see that there are still some small percentage of students still having like a hesitance in terms of using the digital tool, right? As you can see the orange percentage here, or number 3 there, some of these students still somehow show negative toward this card too. So I think for our next step, we would like to explore further the perception of these like unknown students. So for our ongoing project, we are going to look at to do the interview of the students, so to get further in-depth understanding of their perception toward this digital tool. And another note we want to say is that the effectiveness of this digital tool on the student engagement still depend on students' perception and their practices in class as well. Because
I'll have to stop you there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
One more presentation to get through.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the team from School of Languages and Cultures. I'm going to introduce Jonathan Staggs from the School of Business, who's going to share his Persian Business Design Studio. Because we're going to go right down to the wire, I'll just let you know that Luke's going to put in an evaluation form into the chat column. So I'd love people, if they get the opportunity, to duck in there and fill out one of their forms so we get some feedback on the session. Thank you once again, and thank you to you, Jonathan.
Great, thank you, Peter, and thanks everyone for being where you are. I just wanted to introduce the Persian Business Design Studio. I think it's an intriguing title, and I thought I'd put some pictures up to sort of pique your interest. And this is a collaboration with Hamid Harapi, who's actually on this call, so feel free to reach out to him using direct chat, as well as Masha, who are from the management discipline within the School of Business. Now, this is a course that I teach. This is the 3rd time I've run the course. It's basically a strategy course between 240 and 280 postgraduate students per semester. The first 6 weeks is spent going through rational strategic tools. These are tools that could be applied anywhere in any boardroom across the world. So the first half of the semester is devoted to that. And then the back half is what we call the Business Design Studio. And this semester, it had a Persian feel to it. Now, if we could go to the next slide, please, Peter. You might be asking, well, firstly, what is the Business Design Studio? I really want to acknowledge Stuart Middleton, a colleague here in the Strategy and Entrepreneurship discipline. He originally came up with this concept and building on scholarship on this creative experimentation, getting students to use their hands, be creative in the classroom. And so you can see here some of the practices by which we can be creative, almost like Leonardo da Vinci, sort of breaking down that dichotomy between art and invention, and ultimately for my course, strategic thinking. Now, where I disagreed with Stuart was he would actually get students to create things themselves. And I just felt from Bloom's taxonomy that getting students to create something was a bridge too far. And so what we've done in collaboration with my colleagues is curate a set of stimulus pieces by which then we can practice creativity and we can practice critical thinking. So if you wanted to go to that next slide, Peter, I've sort of tried to set this up as, right, the intention of the business studio is to use these pieces to try to think creatively and critically about business and the way we do business. And now you might be able to see the slides are quite small, but down the bottom right, or my bottom right, we can see this ethical framework of business should get better at doing ethical responsibility. And so what my main argument was is that if business continues to perpetuate injustice in the world, we need to think quite critically about some of these rational tools. And so if you can see at the top right, there's a great article written here which really connects Eastern and Western perspectives. And in particular, it talks about institutions and geographies. And I guess my critique of the rational tools is that they are universally applied without much consideration, respect for institutions and existing geographies around the world. There tends to be this cookie cutter approach of Western rational business tools being applied across the earth. And so we really wanted students to sort of critique and be creative. Is there a better way to do business? And so if you could go to this next slide, Peter. Who better than to critique than Walmart? And so we provided students a case study which we worked on for 5 weeks towards the back half of the course. And this case study really sets up this anomaly of how much should Walmart continue to grow. We had 5 leadership periods with which to critique and perhaps potentially reframe the way that these CEOs understood their role. I guess the good or the bad thing about Walmart is that there are plenty of ethical problems with their business. So each week we were able to identify a leadership period, what were the tools being used to promote growth, and then using a Persian business design insight, how might we think about that creatively and critically? So if you could go to the next slide, Peter, I just wanted to give an example of the sort of tactile activity we wanted students to do. Is we watched a vision statement by Doug McMillan, CEO of Walmart. And then in the first 45 minutes, right, use one of the rational tools that we taught in the first half of the course. How does his vision align with one of those tools of growth? And then in the second half, using a Persian insight, and we've got some pieces coming up to show you, how would you reframe his speech? And so, and this is where we wanted students in small teams in an open collaborative room to really engage with it and say, okay, we've just watched the Persian insight. How might we use that to critically reflect upon what we've just heard? And so if we could go to that next slide, Peter. But first of all, part of the interest and part of the critique, part of the challenge for me was about impressions of Iran. We want students, according to our graduate attributes, to be courageous. We want them to be culturally capable. We want them to be respectful leaders. But what I wanted to capture first is, what are your first impressions of Iran? And so we had a Slido there, and we're able to get a word cloud. And you can see here some very stereotypical kinds of responses. We were then at the end of the semester able to capture a much richer, nuanced perspective of what we've actually learned from an ancient Eastern culture that might help us be creative and more critical in the way that we use tools and techniques for business. And so if we could go to that next slide, Peter, we've got And so Hamid kindly, he's done some great research on the role of that geography plays in shaping mindset. And so he was able to introduce one of his papers to the students. But we were also able to reflect upon the empire builder King Cyrus way back in 500 BC. And this was taking a real risk. As an educator, I had no idea how this was going to play out. Like, are we really going to go back this far in history to be able to critically reflect upon the leadership style of Sam Walton? But to the students' credit, they were able to identify that King Cyrus, though he was great, though he was an empire builder, he didn't decimate every civilization that he conquered. In fact, he let them continue to be in, basically maintain the integrity of their culture. We were then able to compare that to Walmart's strategy, which tends to decimate local business wherever it sets its feet. So I'm hoping that you can see by the inclusion of stimulus pieces such as King Cyrus, some of Hamid's work on Iranian geography, and then even this theatrical piece, which looks at the plight of a man who wants to take care of his father, even though his father has Alzheimer's and doesn't recognize him anymore, while his wife wants to go to the US and pursue a better life. And so this promotes this tension of means-ends relationships when it comes to ethics. How ought we act? And then critically reflect upon how we use strategy. And so if you could go to that next slide, please, Peter.
We've just got a few more minutes left, Jonathan.
Yeah, sure.
So how that fits with your plan?
Yep, yeah, that's fine. That's perfect. I just wanted to, if you can click through, there's Hamid's great speech. The students needed a lot of scaffolding. About 95% of my students at that postgraduate level, you could keep clicking through there, Peter, come from cultures that aren't really designed to get them to think creatively and critically. I have to be honest. And so what we did was to provide scaffolding. Okay, here is a portfolio piece. Become aware of your own perspective. What emerges for you? What stands out? Or what puts you off? And try to get students to engage in a piece. Stage 2, if you want to go to that slide, Peter, gets them to think about the genre. And so this is where, similar to Judith's presentation at the start of this session, what supporting material can help explain the genre that we're looking at, whether that's architecture, culinary design, movies, and then how might that support your own insight around business? And so we provided a bunch of scholarly material, YouTube videos about the genre to get students to think in a multidisciplinary and creative way. And then finally, stage 3, Peter, would be just what was the artist trying to do? How do they understand their role as an artist or a chef? And then how might we critically reflect upon the CEO in question? And how might CEOs think differently rather than just profit maximization and global dominance? How might they recraft their work? And so this then was an opportunity for creativity and critical thinking. So the next slide, and I think I've only got a couple left, and that may be just some student examples. If you could click through, Peter.
Yeah, we'll have to finish up for the next session starting at 11:30. So,
yeah, if you can click through the next slide. So here's just an example of some of the work that, and this was group work, trying to get students to think individually first, and then as a group to compare and contrast insights. So this is a bit of an exemplar of how they brought in supporting material to then critique the way perhaps Western thinking can be dominant and to be open to other approaches. And then the final assessment piece, and so that was worth 30%. And then a final 10% reflection, which I understand some of my colleagues have tried to do also, just that reflective piece. Draw yourself as a strategist, having this rational toolkit that we've introduced, but also this, what we call aesthetic, holistic thinking. How might you understand your role as a future business leader? And so that was the way that we finished this particular course. So full credit to my Iranian colleagues. It was wonderful to work with them as well, and personally to learn so much about this ancient culture. Thank you, everyone.
Well, lovely. Thank you, Jonathan, and your timing is perfect. I'd like to quickly thank all of our presenters today. It's been really interesting. If you go back and look through the chat, there's some really positive comments throughout the chat session today. I will have to finish up now. Thank you once again. There's a really interesting session coming up next. And if you're booked in, you're welcome to stay around for it. Thank you very much.